First things first, I heard some people disapproved of my drinking wine on the first video that was made in New Orleans in springtime this year. Those people who do not like me to drink wine, and those people who do not like to see me drinking wine, should remember what the first miracle was that Christ made. Do I have to say more?
No.
Thank you. Some people, I have to correct another misunderstanding, some people had the audacity to call me a self-appointed theologian. That is not correct. I hold a doctorate in theology of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. That means the Pope appointed me a theologian, not I. There's another thing that I have to clear up. I was quoting Canon 13 of the 7th session of the Council of Trent. And this canon, it is very important, this canon outlaws any future writing up of a new liturgy. This canon is, unfortunately, most of the times translated in a wrong way. Even with 10 books, I can only recommend 10 books to you, but sometimes, of course, everybody makes mistakes, you just heard mine. Sometimes things are not translated in the correct way, and that can cause a lot of confusion. Now, Canon 13 of the 7th session of the Council of Trent, in English, if anyone says that the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church want to be used in the solemn administration of the sacraments may be condemned, or without sin be omitted at pleasure by the ministers, or be changed by every pastor of the churches into other new ones, let him be anathema. That translation is wrong. It doesn't say or changed by every pastor, because in the Latin it says, Sequis dixerit receptos et approbatos ecclesiae catholici ritus in solemni sacramentorum administratione ad iberi consuetos ad contemni, aut sine peccato a ministris prolibitor omitti, aut in novos alios per quem cumque ecclesiarum pastorem mutari posse anathema sit. Per quem cumque, by whomsoever. And that gives a totally different significance to this canon. If you say that if anyone says that the Catholic and the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church can be changed by every pastor, you're not saying anything new. We don't need the Council of Trent to tell me that I must not change the rites. I don't need the Council of Trent for explaining to me that the Catholic liturgy cannot be changed around by every single parish priest. And that's not what the Council intended to say. As a matter of fact, the Council is talking about people who do not esteem the approved and habitual rites of the Church. Because it says, want to be used in the solemn administration of the sacraments, these rites may be condemned. And the Council says whoever says they may be condemned is to be held outside the Church. The Council of Trent says that whoever says that you can leave out things, something, words, sentences, meanings, gestures in these rites at pleasure by the ministers, he ought to be considered outside the Church. Now the Council of Trent has just said that nobody can change the rites. It doesn't have to repeat it by saying changed by every pastor. The Council in fact intended to say and said per quemcumque ecclesiarum pastorem, by whomsoever. Now whomsoever includes the popes. The Pope is a pastor of the churches. He's Bishop of Rome, Archbishop of the province of Latium, Primate of Italy, Patriarch of the West, Vicar of Christ, and servant of the servants of God. The Pope cannot write up new rites. That's what the Council of Trent said. This is what Pope Innocent III said when he said, if a future Pope was to change round all the sacraments and everything, you do not follow him. And at the Council of Florence, Pope Eugene IV had as his personal theologian a certain Cardinal Torquemada, the uncle of the famous and saintly Inquisitor in Spain. And Cardinal Torquemada wrote a book which is called Summa Ecclesiae, And in his book, Summa Ecclesiae, he says, if a pope was to try to change all the rites and the sacraments, he puts himself outside the church. Pope Eugene IV read that book, and he gave the title Defender of the Faith to Cardinal Torquemada. Before I start to explain to you the problems of Vatican II, I want to make some very important distinctions. I noticed in recent conversations, in discussions, even with famous writers, with famous learned men, very learned men, that there seems to be a great difficulty to apply the distinction of objective and subjective, even by people who are very learned and are quite able to explain the distinction to me academically. Still, they have a problem applying it. So let me make a few distinctions, starting with objective, subjective. Now, the word objective, you can check me. You can check me on everything I say. Check me with the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language if you don't trust my explanation. Objective means something concerned the object, the thing. Subjective means something concerned the person. So when I pronounce an objective judgment, I judge facts and things, or actions. When I pronounce a subjective judgment, I judge a person. And I do not want to do that, by the way. Objectively, this is a very good wine. Subjectively, not everybody might like it. Objectively means concerning the thing itself, what it is and how it is. Subjectively means what it means to me, how I understand it. When the Council of Florence, Pope Eugene IV, in 1441, said that nobody who is not subject to the Roman Pontiff, even if he was to shed his blood for Christ, cannot be saved, the Pope was pronouncing an objective judgment. The Pope did not say that all Protestants are in hell. The Pope said, objectively speaking, they have no chance to be saved. Subjectively, what the Lord will do with them, we do not know. De internis ecclesia non judicat, the Church does not judge internal things. De mortuis ecclesia non judicat, the Church does not judge the dead. So this is the distinction of objective and subjective. There has to be a distinction of material and formal. Material means something is there. It exists. It is there. Formal means it is declared as such. When I say that the present Pope is a heretic, sometimes that causes raised eyebrows and harsh criticisms. I say the present Pope is a material heretic. That means there is heresy to be found in his writings, and I will prove it to you, and I have proven it to you on the first tape. I do not say he is a heretic in the sense that he wants to say heresy, that he commits the sin of heresy. I would not dare to pronounce this judgment. Nobody can judge the Pope anyway, and nobody can judge other people's intentions and other people's consciences. We can only judge what we see. I see there is heresy printed, so it is there, material heresy. The matter of heresy is there. I do not say it is formal heresy. To show you the difference, the present Pope always says, in accordance with tradition, I say to you, and then he says something wrong. Well, obviously, he doesn't mean to say heresy. He wouldn't say in accordance to tradition. But if he was to say, contrary to what the Council of Trent taught you, I say, in that moment, he ceases to be Pope, most probably, because that would be objective, formal heresy, not material heresy. There's another distinction. It is unbelievable what people say after I held a speech or gave a sermon. I once said, the new Mass of Paul VI, celebrated in Latin according to the book, most probably is validly celebrated. And somebody walked out of the session and said, Father Hesse says the new Mass is all right. I didn't say it's all right. I said it's valid under certain circumstances. Valid means validity. It takes place. It is there. It is not licit. The question of licity, is it licit or not licit, means is it allowed or not allowed? Under certain circumstances, the new rites of the sacraments may take place as well. That doesn't mean they are allowed. See, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church always recognizes the fact that the Russian Orthodox Church has all the 7 sacraments valid, but not licit because they're heretics and schismatics. They're heretics because they say the Pope is not infallible, never infallible, and they're schismatics because they say the Pope does not have the primacy. But they celebrate validly. So you have to get this distinction right, valid and licit. Then, there's something very important to be said about today's usage of language. And here I want to give you the distinction of act and potency. The entire philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas is based on the distinction of act and potency. A thing, anything that is, can be in 2 ways. Actually or potentially. Something that is might be already what it should be and is, and it might be something else in the future. Vatican II and the present Pope do not use this distinction because they're based on a different philosophy, and that causes a lot of confusion. When the present Pope says all people are saved, is he right? Yes, he is right. Oh yeah, oh yes. All people are saved in potency, potentially. Possibly they are saved. Possibly. When Christ died on the cross in order to enable mankind to be saved. That doesn't mean that everybody will be saved. And actually not everybody is saved. Our Lady showed the children that hell is packed with people when she appeared in Fatima in 1917. So, when I speak English, you will agree with me, I have to submit to the rules of speaking English. When I speak, I have to submit to the rules of speaking. I do not think you would appreciate it very much if I was to tell you, I am Pope. I am Pope, potentially. So is every male present. I am Pope, potentially. As long as I tell you that possibly I might become Pope, but the probability is zilch, you will say, yes, okay. But if I was to say to you, I am Pope, you would say, this guy is nuts. Rightly so. But if I say to you, possibly, in as far as potentiality, possibility is concerned, Christ saved everybody. He did not, as far as the actuality is concerned, save everybody, because there's enough people who say no. So I try my best to submit to the rules of the English language and to the rules of language, and I request the Pope to do the same. I have a right to request it because he's our supreme teacher, and I have a right to demand from my supreme teacher that he uses the language correctly. So I want him to say, not everybody is saved, only potentially everybody is saved. So far for the distinctions. Then there is a difference between heresy, schism, error, disobedience. Schism means I separate myself from the church, not denying anything of the faith itself, but I separate myself from the church, denying the church authority. If I tell you that you shouldn't listen to the Pope when he says something wrong, I just tell you what Pope Innocent III said. I just tell you what Pope Pius IX said. If I was to tell you, you should not regard this Pope anyway, then I would lead you into schism. Do not deny the power of decision to the Pope. Look, President Clinton is president or not? Unfortunately, yes. She is, excuse me, he is president. He is president. Is he the supreme commander of the armed forces of the United States? Yes, unfortunately, yes. We must not deny this. We have no right to deny this. But if he was to tell me as Supreme Commander, that I should disregard the Ten Commandments, I will say, no, sir, I will not. I reject the command. I do not reject his power to give a command. And this is our relationship to the present Pope. We are sorry for what he does, but we do not deny that he is Pope. We do not deny that he has the power. We do not deny that only the Catholic Church is the right church. We do not deny that the Catholic Church has to be led by the Pope as the Vicar of Christ. Anybody of you who denies that is in schism with the Church. What does heresy mean? Heresy means, materially, objectively, first of all, heresy means you deny or doubt a defined doctrine of the Church. If you say, Our Lady was not immaculately conceived, you're a heretic. If you say, I'm really not sure if this really happened, you're a heretic. Materially first, because you might have misunderstood something. Formally, if you say, I don't care what the Church says, it's not true. You might be in error. Contrary to heresy, which means that you know the dogma of the Church and you deny or doubt it, you might have a mistaken understanding of what the Church says. You might be erroneous. Sometimes this present Pope is in error, sometimes he's in heresy, materially. If I have to suppose that there is something the Church defined that he has to know, and he says something to the contrary, then I see he's a heretic. If I see that he misunderstood, clearly misunderstood a dogma, then I have to talk about error. Always judging objectively and materially. Disobedience has nothing got to do with schism or heresy or error. When Archbishop Lefebvre denied the Pope's command not to consecrate bishops, well, at first glance, he was disobedient. I have explained in my other tape why he was not disobedient. He was disobedient to a wrong and unjust and dangerous command coming from the Pope. He was not disobedient to tradition and the will of Christ. But in no case, and from no viewpoint, is it justified to say that he is in schism. Schism means to deny the authority of the Pope, not to disobey a command. I have explained that. These distinctions must be clear in your minds, otherwise you will not understand what I'm about to say. And then there's something that I have to explain about what is called in Latin the loci theologici, the theological places, the theological positions. I told you that something might be heresy and something might be erroneous. But there are finer distinctions than that. A Catholic truth can be de fide divina, by divine faith. That is when the Council of Trent or the Council of Florence or First Vatican Council declared a dogma. It might be de fide catholica. That is when the Church has always believed it. De fide catholica means the Church has always believed it. It's part of the faith, like the creed. De fide definita means the Church has always believed it, but once in history, a Pope made a definition. When in 1854, Pope Pius IX proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, he did not tell us anything new. He just made a definition about what it is exactly to mean. Then you might have a theological judgment which is called fide proxima, closest to the faith. That means it's not a dogma, but the Church has always believed it, and it could be a dogma any time. Like, for example, the co-redemptrix, the fact that Our Lady has had the first role in helping with redemption. That will have to be defined eventually, for the simple reason that many people are confused about what it means. Did Our Lady redeem us? No. Our Lord did, and only our Lord. Then why may she get the title of co-redemptrix? What does it exactly mean? Well, I'm not the Pope and I won't define it, but the Pope should in the future. But it is a sententia fide proxima. That means you may not deny it without fear of punishment from God. Then there's a sententia certa. That means it is not actually of the faith, but we are very sure about it. And then there's something which is sententia communis. That means we might not even be sure about it, but everybody says so. Not in the sense of democracy, but in the sense of historical accordance, in the sense that most of the saints agreed on it, most of the theologians in history and church teachers agreed on it, and most of the popes agreed on it. That's a sententia communis. And then you have a sententia probabilis. It is probable, that means. We don't know exactly, but probably that's what it is. Like the old question, what happens in certain circumstances if somebody who is not in the state of grace dies with an act of contrition? The church always said, if he does a perfect act of contrition, he will be saved. But we don't. It's not a dogma. It is most probably so. Most probably he will be saved. It is the sententia probabilis means we don't know any better than what we got here. Probably this is what it is, but we have not yet understood sacred scripture and tradition enough to be sure about it. And then there's the ecclesiastical censures. I've been criticized for calling Vatican II a heretical council because they said there's many true things in here, many true quotations. And then there are many quotations in here that are definitely not heresy, but just strange, ambiguous, funny, weird. So let me explain these terms to you. If something is heretical, it is directly denying a dogma of the faith. If something is heresy proxima, close to heresy, it is not actually denying literally a dogma, but it's coming pretty close to it. If something is erroneous, it is not denying a dogma, it's just making a mistake about it. If something is errore proxima, closest to an error, it is not wrong in itself, but by circumstances. If something is temeraria, it means it's rather daring to say so. In the first document of Vatican II, you will find a lot of things that the Church considers daring. It's daring to say so. What does it mean it's daring to say so? Now, the fact that priests, in the traditional rite of the Latin Church, say the Leonine prayers after Mass, the three Hail Marys, the Salve Regina, and so on, has been established by Pope Leo XIII. I cannot possibly say it's an ancient tradition, right? But if I was to say, oh, we don't need that, obviously it's not heresy. It was not defined that we have to say it. Obviously it's not close to heresy. Obviously it's not erroneous because we're not talking about the truth of the faith. If I was to say we don't need the Leonine prayers, I would say something that is daring, because how dare I say it? How dare you say it? And at the same time, it's male sonans. It doesn't sound good. It never sounds good if you criticize tradition. And it is piarum aureum offensiva. It's offensive to pious ears. Somebody tells me I don't give a damn about the Leonine prayers, I'm offended, because I hold them dear to my heart. They're more needed than ever before nowadays. And if somebody really expresses his viewpoints like this, I'm offended. I'm offended in my pious ears, because in my piety, in my submission to tradition, in my accepting what is tradition, in my respect for Leo XIII, I'm offended. And it is scandalous too when done in public, because some other people will be offended and say, what's this guy? What's his authority? How does he dare to say Pope Leo XIII was wrong? Now, I will say to you, in certain circumstances, that John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 1st, and John Paul the 2nd are wrong, and sometimes even Pius the 12th in his actions was wrong. How dare I say it? Well, when I say it, I explain it to you. I do not just say that's a fact and you better believe it. That would be daring and offensive. And this is another censure of the Church. I have to clear up a mistake. a missal in 1570, is not binding to successors. As a matter of fact, one of the most prominent traditionalists in this country said that. Their argument very often is the following. Furthermore, by these presents and by virtue of our apostolic authority, we give and grant in perpetuity that for the singing or reading of Mass in any church whatsoever, this missal may be followed absolutely, without any scruple of conscience or fear of incurring any penalty, judgment, or censure, and may be freely and lawfully used. Nor shall bishops, administrators, canons, chaplains, and other secular priests, or religious of whatsoever order, or by whatsoever title be designated, be obliged to celebrate Mass otherwise than enjoined by us. We likewise order and declare that no one whosoever shall be forced to coerced into altering this missal. And this present constitution can never be revoked or modified, but shall forever remain valid and have the force of law. Notwithstanding previous constitutions or edicts of provincial or synodal councils, and notwithstanding the usage of the churches aforesaid, established by very long and even immemorial prescriptions, saving only usage of more than 200 years. They say the same legal formula can never be revoked or modified, but shall forever remain valid and have the force of law, was used by Benedict XIV when he dissolved the Jesuit order. Therefore, if I was right in saying that quo primo must never be changed, Pope Pius VII was wrong when he reinstituted the Jesuit order and went against the decree of his predecessor. These people do not understand that we deal with a disciplinary matter, not a matter of faith. If a pope dissolves the Jesuit order, another one might as well say, well, we have the Jesuit order back again. I don't know if this was good or bad. Judging to what happens today, it might have been a very bad decision, but that's not the point. The point is, we are talking about disciplinary matters. I told you that the Pope cannot bind his successors in disciplinary matters and matters of positive law. The way how Mass is said, however, is not a mere question of discipline and positive law. If the oldest liturgical law of all is lex orandi, lex credendi, the law of what has to be prayed determines the law of what has to be believed, then Holy Mass is not only a question of faith, but the basis of faith. If you change Holy Mass around, and if Holy Mass is not what it was, then you have a different basis of the faith. That means you have different laws of praying, you have different laws of believing. So, when a pope uses a formula like this on the question if I may wear violet buttons or not, his successor might as well say, I don't care. But if a pope uses this formula on something as important as the Roman liturgy, his successor may not say that. Therefore, I read again, abbreviated, by these presents and by virtue of our apostolic authority, we order and declare that no one whosoever shall be forced to coerced into altering this missal, and this present constitution can never be revoked or modified, but shall forever remain valid and have the force of law. This constitution deals about the basis of the faith. It deals about matters of the faith. It cannot be revoked. When Pope Pius X decided that the Sunday during the year, is to be elevated to the rank, practically to the rank of duplex prima classis, that meant the rank of a very important feast, he did not revoke or modify this constitution. He did not say this cannot remain valid and have the force of law. On the contrary, he explained that he was restoring the importance of Sunday, because at the time of St. Pius V, there were a lot less saints in the calendar than you'll find now. So at the times of St. Pius V, there were many Sunday Masses in green chasuble. By the time St. Pius X was Pope, there were very few Sunday Masses in green chasuble, because most Sundays during the summer have some saint to be celebrated, some saint more important than the Sunday used to be. And this is not good. This is not the intention of Pius V, and it's not the old Mass. So he elevated the rank of Sunday in order to have the green chasuble, part of the sign that every sacrament is, in order to have the green chasuble and the Sunday celebrated again, and not just commemorated. The very fact, we talk about interpretation. Is it the Herr Dr. Hesse who interprets this apostolic constitution, or the popes? Yes, it is the popes, not the Herr Dr. Hesse. It is not Father Gregory who interprets this constitution. The popes did. And if those traditionalists who say that this is not binding would bother to read all the decrees that you find in the Roman Missal of St. Pius V, issued by his successors, including John the 23rd, you will see that the popes interpreted quo primum as something unchangeable. Because up till 1962, with the Missal of John the 23rd, you always found at the beginning of the Missal quo primum and all the decrees of the other popes who changed little things, rubrics mostly. And the popes who dared to change things in the Missal, even if it was only minor rubrics, explained why they did it. Now, if quo primum was not binding to a successor, why would the successor want to explain himself that well? If he has the right anyway to change things, he doesn't have to explain that. If the Pope says, from now on, every priest who is ordained in Rome will automatically have the title of Monsignor, he does not have to explain that. If the Pope says, I want you to say the Rosary not only every day, but on Sunday 3 times. It might be a bit demanding, but he doesn't have to explain why he wants it. He's the Pope. Why did all the popes after Pius V, until Paul VI of most infelicitous memory, why did all these popes explain every single change they made? Because they knew that quo primum was binding, so they had to explain, we did not go against quo primum with what we did. And they explained why what they did was not against the will of St. Pius V, binding them forever. This had to be cleared up. It is ridiculous to argue against the binding authority of this document, because it's probably one of the most important ever issued, and it binds the popes. It binds the popes because of the Canon 13, the 7th session of Council of Trent, because of In Junctum Nobis by Paul IV that said we hold steadfast to all traditions, because of the tradition in the Church, because of the oath of incoronation, and because of all the teachings of all the popes until 1958. The teaching of the popes, what does that mean? What is the authority of a pope teaching? A pope can teach in an extraordinary magisterial manner or in an ordinary magisterial manner. A pope may define a dogma or condemn a heresy, binding every single Christian, not only in his conscience and obedience, but by his divine faith. Even in the new code of canon law, this rule has been maintained, believe it or not. Now, what's the difference between extraordinary and ordinary magisterium? The ordinary magisterium is when the Pope, in a non-solemn way, decides on moral issues or teaches theology. He teaches something about the faith. Pius XII, in the 1940s and 50s, was faced with modernist priests and bishops who said, we only have to believe the Pope when he pronounces a dogma. They said we don't have to believe and obey the Pope in the other things. Now, usually mankind has a tendency, just like a pendulum, one extreme to the other. Either it's far right or far left. Either it is beyond what is right or it is not reaching what is right. There are many people in this country who are really downright what should be called paperlists. If the Pope tomorrow dyes his hair green, I will do it too. Oh, the Pope can do everything. He is always infallible. He's not infallible unless he claims to be infallible and uses the necessary formula. The Pope has, in order to be infallible, he has to say, by virtue of my apostolic authority, I herewith declare, statute, and define that so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. This is to be held forever by every Catholic, by every single Catholic, under the pain of excommunication. This is to be held forever. Every Catholic must believe it. Pope John Paul II used this formula once in his 19-year career as Pope. When he decided that women cannot be ordained to the priesthood, he said, this is to be, I decide this forever by virtue of my apostolic authority, and this has to be believed by everybody forever. It seems that this was an infallible pronouncement. When the Pope says, I think this and this and this and this happened, then he's just speaking as a private person. Pius XII said in his encyclical Humani Generis concerning some false opinions which threaten to undermine the foundations of Catholic doctrine, in number 20 he says, nor must it be thought that what is expounded in encyclical letters does not of itself demand consent, since in writing such letters the popes do not exercise the supreme power of their teaching authority. So I'll give you the sign where to repeat, where to continue with the text. And generally what is expounded and inculcated in encyclical letters already for other reasons appertains to Catholic doctrine. But if the Supreme Pontiffs in their official documents purposely pass judgment on a matter up to that time under dispute, it is obvious that the matter, according to the mind and will of the same Pontiff, cannot be any longer considered a question open to discussing among theologians. I want to see who dares now, after having heard this, still to say that the Pope cannot bind his successor in the ordinary magisterium. That means with an encyclical. The Pope says here, in writing such letters, the popes do not exercise the supreme power of their teaching authority. But generally what is expounded and inculcated in encyclical letters already for other reasons appertains to Catholic doctrine. But if the Supreme Pontiffs in their official documents purposely pass judgment on a matter up to that time under dispute, it is obvious that the matter, according to the mind and will of the same Pontiffs, cannot be any longer considered a question open to discussion among theologians. When Pope Paul VI wrote Humane Vitae, he did not pronounce a dogma. But no future Pope may ever dare to say that artificial contraception is all right. When Pope Pius IX condemned all kinds of heresies in his syllabus of errors, he did not proclaim a dogma. But woe unto the Pope who says the contrary. The Pope today says the contrary. So this is the teaching authority. The Pope can bind his successor in many things. Why? There's an old Latin saying, par in parem potestatem non habet. An equal does not have power in an equal. Yes, right. That's why, in all things that are left up to the individual Pope to decide, he cannot bind his successor. But when the Pope says, this here, from now on, has to be considered part of tradition, he doesn't have to say that verbally, literally. He just has to say, we condemn this error, we don't want this to be discussed any longer, and I herewith say that's what it is, or that is what has to be done by all Christians, by all faithful. Then he's making this part of tradition. Now the tradition, tradition does not grow, tradition does not know change. We'll talk about this in the next session. Tradition is something that has been concluded with the death of the last apostle. So the Pope does not add anything to tradition. He just says, this is part of tradition, this always has been part of tradition, and now that he has said that, no successor may say anything to the contrary. Never, ever. When the Pope in 1950 made the Assumption of Our Lady a dogma, again he did not say anything new. The apostles were witnesses to the empty grave. The church has always believed that Our Lady is in heaven with body and soul. And even before Pius XII proclaimed it a solemn dogma, Pius IX would not have had the right to say, no, this is not true. He would have put himself outside the church. The popes are absolutely bound to tradition. And this is the reason why Vatican II is unacceptable.